Welcome to Ideas in Action, a television series about ideas and their consequences. I'm Jim Glassman. This week, it's not just American business that has gone global, American universities have too. In response to the worldwide demand for American-style higher education, American universities have expanded into countries across the globe, opening branches from Cairo to Canberra. Joining me to explore this topic are Ben Wildavsky. He's the author of The Great Brain Race, How Global Universities Are Reshaping the World, and a senior fellow at the Kaufman Foundation. Beth McMurtry. She's the senior editor of international news at the Chronicle of Higher Education, where she oversees a team of foreign correspondents. And Peter N. Stearns. He's the provost at George Mason University. He's the author of Educating Global Citizens in Colleges and Universities. The topic this week, Minds on the Move. Can America's universities meet the global challenge? This is Ideas in Action.
Funding for Ideas in Action is provided by Investors Business Daily. Every stock market cycle is led by America's never-ending stream of innovative new companies and inventions. Investors Business Daily helps investors find these new leaders as they emerge. More information is available at investors.com.
This is Education City, a brand new 2,500-acre campus in the tiny nation of Qatar on the Persian Gulf. Some of America's leading universities have set up shop here, guests of a royal family that wants an American education for their next generation of scientists, engineers, and even journalists. In fact, American universities are opening branches all over the map, hoping to cash in on one of the world's most fluid markets, the global trade in knowledge. More than 3 million students are now studying outside their home countries, and 22% of them are enrolled here in the U.S. It's a trend that will likely continue, reshaping not only American higher education, but international relations as well. How about that, Ben? Does this new trend have the opportunity to change relations between countries?
I think there are clearly educational benefits to this kind of knowledge exchange. I think there are economic benefits. I'm actually agnostic as to whether or not there are real benefits for international relations. I guess I would just briefly say it's a little bit like business. We have globalization of business. We have lots of interaction. I think it's been a net plus for the world. I don't know whether it's made everybody hold hands and be friends.
You know, Peter, Ben's book is called The Great Brain Race, which might imply to some people that they're winners and losers. Do you agree with that? I mean, are there winners and losers here? Can the United States, for example, be a loser? Or does it benefit everybody?
My basic answer is it has the potential for wide benefit. So I don't think it's a win-lose proposition. However, there will be types of universities and types of countries that will do better than others. And frankly, right now, although we're doing okay currently, we are under new competitive pressure with regard to international educational opportunities.
Beth, when I look at a list like Newsweek has a list of the top universities in the world, there are 10 universities, 8 of them are U.S., one's Oxford and one's Cambridge, so 8 out of the 10 are American. But is there the chance within the next few years that by standards such as this, that American universities will be overtaken by universities in Asia, for example, or Europe, or even in the Middle East?
I don't think anybody would predict that American universities will be overtaken as a system by other countries. I think what you're seeing now are pockets of excellence in other countries where governments choose to invest in certain areas of research or where they put a lot of effort into recruiting students. You might see individual institutions rise within those rankings.
Ben, you're saying that this new global trend is really all about student mobility. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think we just have to look at the sheer numbers. I mean, this is an old trend. When the first Western universities started in the Middle Ages, students traveled around Europe, to Paris and Bologna, Oxford, the very first Western universities. But now we have this, it's gone to warp speed. As you said, 3 million students globally mobile, traveling outside their home countries. That's a 57% increase in a decade. So it's an enormous phenomena. And you have other kinds of mobility, mobility of research, mobility of campuses themselves, as you mentioned.
And is that mobility the result of people becoming richer? Is it the result of better transportation? I mean, what's going on here?
Really, there's this hunger for getting the best knowledge wherever you can get it. It's what some people have called the commodification of knowledge. And that means if people have the means and the ease of travel, and if universities are open to recruiting the best students they can get, and often fee-paying students as well, people will take advantage of those opportunities.
What benefits, Beth, do other countries get from having American universities there? I mean, we hear, and I visited Education City myself in Qatar, and it's quite a phenomenon. But you sort of wonder, are the people in Doha, the people in Qatar, really benefiting from this?
Well, I think it is true that it's sort of an elite segment within these societies, potentially, that actually benefits directly from education. But I think also potentially it could really raise the game of public institutions within those countries. You take the Gulf, for example. Like many parts of the world, teaching there is very traditional, focused on rote memorization. Students aren't encouraged to think critically. Perhaps by having places like Education City there, or NYU's new Abu Dhabi campus, which is going to be the first liberal arts campus in the Gulf, educators there can learn from the American example and adopt some of the better practices.
Well, let's not forget it. These are co-educational universities. That's huge. I interviewed the president of the University of Qatar at her university. It is a she, but at her university, men and women are in separate classrooms. So you can go across town to one of these Western campuses and men and women are studying together.
And really the most stunning example of this, and you talk about it in your book, is King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, where in Saudi Arabia, men and women are going to school together. And this is am I right to say this is the only educational institution in Saudi Arabia where that takes place?
Yes, that is correct. I mean, this is it's revolutionary there. I mean, again, it's a compound. Some people would say it's really distinct from mainstream Saudi society, but I think it's symbolically very important. And the first week they opened last fall, the first week, one of the imams on the governing religious council for Saudi Arabia said this was evil, that men and women were studying together. Well, King Abdullah fired him. So I thought that was pretty important symbolically.
So a university like this kind of provides a wedge that may open up a society like Saudi Arabia's to a more, let's call it, liberal culture. I mean, are your reporters seeing that?
Well, not yet. I think there's still, these branch campuses are very new. They're still sort of behind these gated communities, almost literally. And there's still, I would say, within the countries, a lot of suspicion toward branch campuses where they feel like the Americans, the wealthy Americans, are coming in and poaching some of their students. You see this debate playing out now in India. For years and years, American and other universities wanted to get involved in India. And a lot of politicians, particularly from, say, the Communist Party, said, we don't want you here. We don't want to create a system of haves and have-nots where the wealthiest students can get an American education and everybody else is left out.
Of course, they can get that American education anyway by traveling to the United States.
That's
true.
true.
No, and the paradox, I mean, I think the shame of it is India as a population that is just desperate to improve its educational prospects. They have a terribly inadequate university system, both in terms of the number of places and the quality, and yet for many years, until just recently, when there's a bill that might change things, they've kept out all these foreign universities that could come and help their population. I think it's a tragedy.
Peter, I'd like to talk about George Mason's own experience. I mean, the fact is that there are many universities, including Michigan State, including George Mason, that have made an attempt to export their campuses, and it hasn't quite worked. Tell us your story at George Mason.
Well, the specific story with regard to the campus we operated briefly in the United Arab Emirates is that we had a partner who was ambivalent about the purpose of higher education. And I think the ambivalence is perfectly understandable. We now encounter it all the time. The ambivalence is between a sort of long-term higher education takes many years to pay off view, which I believe is the correct one, as opposed to if we don't reach fiscal stability within 5 years, we've failed. And that ambivalence plus the economic situation led to a situation where we simply could not persist in that effort, although we've maintained operations in other settings. There are special situations like Qatar, like Abu Dhabi with NYU, where people take a longer view and or have deeper pockets. But there are lots of other situations that are frankly harder to evaluate.
And you think that in order to succeed, these kind of transplanted universities or branches need to look to the longer run?
No question you need a longer run. not longer run. And by the way, there is historical experience here. There was a batch of American universities attempted to set up operations in Japan in the 1980s. Only one ended up succeeding. So this is an experience that we have lived through before, and I frankly think some of the uncertainties are predictable and likely to continue.
These are not really money-making ventures by and large. I mean, I suppose if you set up a very exclusive small executive MBA program, for example, you could probably make a bit of money. But I think most American and other countries' branch campuses have found that it costs a lot of money and it takes an enormous amount of time to do these right.
I think in Qatar, maybe I should ask Ben about this, but in Qatar, isn't it really the fact that the government there wants to improve the quality of education in general for its elites and I guess even lower down, and so they're willing to make the investment, and you need that kind of partner.
Absolutely. Well, that's one model, and that makes it much easier for a place like Georgetown or Texas A&M to go in because they're not trying to turn a profit. Those governments, and I was told this very clearly, they know the oil money's not going to last forever. They know that this is a buzz phrase, knowledge economy, but it happens to be sometimes conventional wisdom is true. And they want to have a much better educated population, both with their own nationals and in the region, and they think this is the way to get there.
Now, on the financial side, there's also the fact that American universities are benefiting from foreign students.
It's hugely significant to a lot of American universities. The figure I've heard is something like $17 billion comes into the U.S. economy through foreign students' tuition and living expenses and things like that. Universities will often talk about not only does it add to the bottom line, but it also adds to the diversity of their campuses as well. So it's critical, I think, for many universities to continue that flow.
And what's your experience on that, Peter? I know that after 9/11 there was a drop-off, but we're now at record levels in the United States for foreign students.
Although, again, as I mentioned before, we face increasing competition from a variety of sources. So our trajectory has been much more stable than, say, Australia or UK or even now places like Singapore. So yes, we're doing better. It's, at least for the foreseeable future, an important aspect of American educational activity. But we're not doing this alone, and the environment is intense.
And I think we have to be really clear, though. It's the brain. It's not just the revenues. That can be a part of it. It's not just the diversity, though that's part of it. It's the brain power. And we need that. If we care about meritocracy and excellence, and that's what's made our institutions the world's leaders since World War II, we need the best brains here. And I think that intermittently, there's been some, what I call in my book, academic protectionism. There's ambivalence about it. There's sometimes hostility. Are foreign students going to crowd out American students? I think this is very badly misplaced.
But really, how serious is that? I mean, you do show examples in the book, but it seems to me that there aren't too many academic protectionists around anymore, are there?
Where you'll sometimes see it is not necessarily at the university level, but visa policies. We have these restrictions on H-1B visas, which are for talented foreign workers. Well, that has a rebound effect, which is if students come here to study hoping to work afterward, and we send a message, you know what, we're going to make it hard for you to work, they're more likely to go to our competitors.
And are you seeing, just Peter, just your own experience at George Mason, where are the students coming from?
Well, the two vast sources currently are China and India, but all of us, for a variety of reasons, are trying to diversify with increasing recruitment efforts in Southeast Asia, in Sub-Saharan Africa. But China and India are the big pools at this point. South Korea is still an important source, despite some demographic stability. So East Asia and India are the big sources. But Japan has, for example, reduced its export of students.
China is trying to top the international rankings. Do you think that's ever going to happen?
Well, again, I think it goes back to maybe an individual institution could slowly move up within the rankings, but China's system is actually vastly underfinanced. If you get beyond the elite institutions to the more provincial public institutions, it can be pretty bare bones at times. But that said, the Tsinghuas and the Beidas and the Fudan universities, their MITs and Harvards are really doing a lot to raise their profiles, to recruit international students, to recruit top talent. A lot of deans, administrators, presidents have worked in the U.S. or studied in the U.S. at some point and are going back because they see real opportunity there.
Oh yeah, it's a global competitive marketplace, and I think we have to see that it goes well beyond our branch campuses. In China, in Saudi Arabia's KAUST is not a branch campus. It's their own effort to create a great, world-class university. South Korea is doing the same thing. China is now taking in more foreign students than it sends overseas. So I think that I don't disagree that the rankings aren't going to get shaken up overnight, But I think there's a real possibility if we look at a 50-year time horizon or a 100-year time horizon, the pecking order could really change.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by KAUST, the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. You say that they're spending, I think you said $5 billion? 10, oops. Okay, so $10 billion just to launch this university. I mean, can you buy that kind of academic status that they seem to be aiming for?
I think it's early days. They've only been open less than a year. What they've done, I think, is very instructive, though. And again, we've talked about business globalization as a parallel. If you're trying to create a great company, what do? You seek the top people. You try to collaborate with the best minds. So KAUST has worked with places like Stanford, with Imperial College in London, I think the University of Texas. They have a lot of partners, and they've actually brought them in to hire their first batch of faculty. So it's a very interesting beast. It's an amalgam of sort of Western university know-how being transplanted to a sort of boutique graduate level institution in Saudi Arabia. I think we'll know in 10 years whether or not they've had the kind of success that would give them that world-class status.
Here's one area, though, where I think if they hit a wall, where they're going to hit it, and it has to do with critical thinking and freedom of ideas and exchange of ideas. Saudi Arabia is Saudi Arabia. China is China. The reason the American system is so strong is because of this freedom of thought and this encouragement of true innovation, pushing through barriers, proposing different ways of thinking and doing things. I don't think any of us are seeing that yet in some of these countries.
Yeah, let's explore that. I mean, is it possible, in fact, to export that kind of atmosphere? I don't know what you found in your experience in you.
I mean, I would agree that there are a variety of Chinese institutions, but there are educators in China that will give you as an eloquent defense of the importance of critical thinking as any American could do. So I believe this is one area where collaboration is really going to pay off for all parties, not in changing the whole Chinese system, but in producing areas where their pedagogy and their educational goals come much closer to the kinds of things we value, partly because we're working with them and they with us.
Ben, you talk about free trade in minds, kind of this Adam Smithian view of the world that's going to be encouraged by the globalization of higher education. Do you see that actually happening now, or is that just kind of a dream?
Oh, I think it's absolutely happening. I mean, I wouldn't claim, I certainly try not to be naive or starry-eyed about this, but I think when you look at the degree of mobility that we see of students seeking out opportunities based much more than ever in history on merit. You can be an Indian student, you can do well on the national exam, you can go to one of their elite technology institutions. I interviewed kids like this, and then you can have a springboard to a global career. The same thing is true in China. I think that free trade in minds is beginning to happen, and I think that if we lower what barriers remain, we'll have more and more of a free flow of people and of ideas, and I think that does create all the benefits you get with free trade in other areas.
And that's really the other important value that universities can achieve through export. I would hope, anyway, this kind of idea of meritocracy. I mean, for many years, universities abroad really just educated the elite, the well-connected. And do you see that changing?
I think so. I mean, a lot of the area where I see that happening is in not so much students, although I think that's true, but also in the hiring of faculty. In many other countries, to be a professor is to be a civil servant, which means that there's no incentive to do the best job that you can do, to push your students, to go beyond the rote lecture. And I think the American style is not that. You really have to prove yourself on a daily basis. And so I think if those ideas get translated into other environments, you could see much more vibrant academic cultures.
Peter, do we run any risk? I know that the notion of free trade in minds is a wonderful one. I certainly subscribe to, but do we run any risk that of sending our knowledge and talent to competitive nations?
Sure. Of course we will. We are. And the risk is, so occasionally we will find ourselves burned, annoyed that somebody picked up something more quickly than they would have otherwise. But the question is one of timing. Nothing's going to happen that wouldn't happen ultimately anyway. The timing may vary because of international context. But the benefits in terms of our standing in the eyes of other people, the kind of knowledge we can benefit from that's being generated elsewhere, the general atmosphere of global collaboration, this all stands far to the excess of any risk involved.
By the way, does George Mason have any plans now going forward to internationalize In addition to bringing international students
sure.
to the university, do you want to do any exporting?
There are two aspects to that. One is we are exploring a couple of specific opportunities, one most notably in South Korea, for establishment of our own programs. But the wave of the future, really, which we haven't directly touched on, is not Americans directly establishing branch campuses. This will continue to be important, but the wave of the future is collaboration with international institutions. In degree programs, we have currently 7 dual degree programs with institutions in various places. This is going to grow very rapidly. It's an opportunity for our students as well as international students, and this is where globalization in education is really heading. Collaboration rather than blanket export of American models.
What happened to your faculty that went to Dubai? Did they like it?
Literally every faculty member that we sent over there, many of whom were extremely skeptical before they went, ended up having a really interesting time. They didn't necessarily want to stay all that long. I don't mean that we had resolved all problems, but the stimulation, the excitement were well beyond their expectations.
Did you have to pay them more?
Again, remember this was a short experiment. Had we gone on for a longer period, we were expecting to have to pay modest premiums. Other places have offered more. It's a mix, and there are real challenges, among other things, in mingling American faculty with other faculty at potentially differential pay rates. So there's some very difficult issues involved.
And I think you talked about some pretty high rates of pay, in fact, for people going to places like Qatar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I came across this sort of by accident, but the very impressive guy, the dean of the Georgetown Foreign Service Program in Qatar, he's since come back to the main campus. He was there for at least 3 or 4 years, and he was making the same as the president of Georgetown, somewhere in the $450,000 range. So that's not the typical package, but this faculty are getting a lot of the typical expat benefits in the Middle East. So they're getting free private school tuition for their kids. They're getting the housing. They're getting business class travel once or twice a year, and they're getting salary premiums that in some places it's hard to pin them down, but maybe 33% above what they would be getting in the States.
Let's end this by, I just want to ask all of you where you think the growth areas are going forward in international education, either geographically or any other sense.
Yeah, well, I think I completely agree with what Peter said earlier, that the future is deeper engagement with institutions in other countries. It's not. I don't think it's the branch campus model. I think it's too hard, too time-consuming, and as other countries grow in sophistication, they're going to become less interested in the exporting of the American model. So what you'll see are faculty exchanges on a deeper level. You'll see university-to-university engagement, where multiple departments are coming together to work on global issues. So you'll see the circulation of academics rather than here, take our model of American education. You know,
another model like that is American University in Washington opened a school in Sharjah, which is one of the Emirates, where they helped the government set up something, and then they left.
Yes.
They did it for 7 years. Turned it all over to the government. I think they're doing the same in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, yes. Well, they never ran the operation. They provided intensive consulting. We're doing the same with a number of campuses in the Middle East and Africa.
And where do you think the growth areas are?
Oh, well, again, collaboration. I hope an accelerated pace of American students taking advantage of global opportunities. We've tended to emphasize the international flow to the American model. It has to be matched by increasing American awareness of global opportunities and systems in other countries, and that's an area that we need to work on.
No, and I think this whole notion that who is us and who is them is going to change a lot. We tend to, again, we sometimes hear concern about being overtaken by other countries. You know, what's going to happen if the Chinese really do build up their universities? Well, number one, I think we shouldn't be worried about that because, again, the free trade model is it's win-win. You know, more smart people in China with PhDs is good for us. It's not bad for us. It gives us all kinds of opportunities. But again, if we start having a lot of collaboration and we have a world in which there is what's called massification, vastly increased enrollment. I mean, China's quintupled their enrollment in the last decade or so. But not only massively increased enrollment, but also a real focus on creating excellent institutions in the American model. I think that's going to just create an effect of more and more people getting the benefits of education, both at the mass level and at the high level that's going to create knowledge and innovation. I'm very, as you can tell, optimistic about this.
I just want to follow up the last item on what Peter said about Americans going abroad. I mean, I read a statistic that was actually quite disappointing that only, I think, 1.5% of American university students do any study abroad at all. I mean, is that a problem?
I think Americans will go abroad when there's a good reason for them to go. If in Europe or in Asia or in the Middle East there are truly great programs created, they will become a magnet, just as we've been a magnet. We used to all go to Germany in the 19th century, and now the Germans are looking to us to figure out how they should improve their own system. So ultimately, it's going to be, it's a free market. It's going to be where people can go and get what they want.
And that's a good place to end it. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Beth. Before we go, I want to remind viewers that you can catch Ideas in Action whenever and wherever you choose. To watch complete shows, just go to our website, ideasinactiontv.com, or download a podcast from the iTunes Store. And that's it for this week's Ideas in Action. I'm Jim Glassman. Thanks for watching.
For more information, visit us at ideasinactiontv.com. Funding for Ideas in Action is provided by Investors Business Daily. Every stock market cycle is led by America's never-ending stream of innovative new companies and inventions. Investors Business Daily helps investors find these new leaders as they emerge. More information is available at investors.com. This program is a production of Grace Creek Media and the George W. Bush Institute, which are solely responsible for its content.